All right, chapter 7 of Narrative in the Life of Frederick Douglass. So we recall he's been a slave for the Aulds, um, and at this time he's starting to understand his hatred for slavery. And the first few chapter or paragraphs talk about the effect that slavery had on his mistress, on Mrs. Auld. If you recall, she was nice, remember, and now she's really evil, and you see what happened here. And there's a quote in the second paragraph where a few sentences in says, "Slavery proved as injurious to her as it did to me." And so again, this juxtaposition of when he first got there, how she was so nice and kind, and then after, especially the master said, "Don't teach him how to read," she became evil, and she became um, much more uh, evil than even Master Auld. And so he really continues this theme of how slavery can tarnish a human being. And but it also produced a desire in Frederick Douglass. He realized that they didn't want him to become educated. They didn't want him to learn how to read. And that made him want to read even more. Look at the end of this paragraph here. "Mistress, in teaching me the alphabet, had given me the inch, and no precaution could prevent me from taking the L." And so then he comes up with this plan. He asks these kids to how to teach him how to uh, read. What do we do? He carried books. So yeah, so in the previous chapter, we saw that he did so many of Master Daniel's errands, and when he did, he would take a book and he would kind of teach himself, and he would give bits of bread to the poor white children in the area to teach him how to teach him letters. And it's so sad because where's that one sentence said? Yeah, right here. It was forbidden to teach slaves. Like right here it says, "For it is almost an unpardonable offense to teach slaves to read in this Christian country." And remember that theme of the religious hypocrisy that continues here in this chapter, and we'll see it continue on in the next few chapters. Of they're supposed to be Christian, but they're doing these incredible uh, acts against humanity, these horrible, atrocious crimes. And then the next chapter begins a very important book that he begins to read, or it's a collection of essays, collection of speeches called the Columbian Orator. And really, this was monumental, especially early on in our country's founding, talking about the values of republicanism and freedom and liberation. And through these speeches, he really got to understand what it meant to be free and what it meant to be human, in fact. And look at in this paragraph, he finds a master conversing with the slave, and the slave um, gives this whole argument against slavery to the master, and in the end, it resulted, look at the end of this paragraph here, resulted in the voluntary emancipation of the slave on the part of the master. And so the slave was able to give an adequate argument against slavery, and thus able to be freed or emancipated. And so that really began the journey for Frederick Douglass to try and become emancipated himself. And so he, in this next paragraph, talking about the speeches on behalf of Catholic emancipation, he reads them. In this paragraph, he uses words like he loathes, detests, abhors, denunciation, um, writhed, and he shows his hatred for slavery and those who are enslaving him. And the more he reads, the more he gets educated, the more he realizes the horrors of slavery. And he begins to almost regret becoming educated, as you see here. He says, I envied my fellow slaves for their stupidity. And really, what kept these slaves in their bondages was their ignorance, their inability to become educated. And here, Frederick Douglass is becoming educated, understanding more about the world, and he wants to liberate himself. And so then he learns about these abolitionists. And here's kind of the first time he talks about abolitionists and what they were all about. He heard a little bit about who they were, and now he's becoming a little bit more interested. And he meets these two people um, towards the end of that paragraph, seeing two Irishmen, and they ask him, "Are ye a slave for life?" Is that how Irish people talk? Anyway, and they start to talk to him about running away up north and find freedom there. But he doesn't believe them. He's like, it's so sad. It says white men have been known to encourage slaves to escape and then to get the reward, catch them and return them to their masters. Remember the Fugitive Slave Acts, the Fugitive Slave Law? Those were all ways that white people continue to uh, beguile, to trick the slaves and for their profit. And so he doesn't believe them. And he ends the chapter with some more kind of ways of how he learned to read and write. And he shows just how ingenious, how smart and clever and creative Frederick Douglass was. And if you recall from the preface, you remember how eloquent of a speaker he was described as, and you kind of see how his ingenuity, how his creativity came out in this chapter here. And so it really continues to show that he had all this creativity, this he was smart, but it was really slavery and the institution of slavery and the slave owners who caused him to be unable to experience his potential. And so he's kind of moving away from the dehumanizing effects to slavery to now showing that he is a valued human, and he's doing everything he can to escape the chains of slavery.